Welcome to this new course about business organization and value creation. What are we going to do in this course? In this course, we're going to go beyond what we have been discussing before about understanding the environment. We have been mainly focused at understanding the environment and how these all different factors can affect my company, can change the way we do business, or can even pose really interesting challenges that have to be solved through the development of innovation projects. Now, in this new course, we are going to really be a little bit more precise about how we can respond to all these environmental changes and how we respond to these challenges. What are we going to study in this particular course? The first thing that we are going to do is understanding a strategy. Now, a strategy is about how we can fit a company into the changing environment. So saying that means that we understand, as we have done before, that the environment is continuously changing. There are new competitors, there are new products on the market that can really affect my company. There are new regulations, there are new societal changes, there are new technological availability factors that can really be used for my company or can be used by my competitors. And all these things, of course, present many challenges to my company. So understanding a strategy means that we need to respond, we need to take action, and we need to adapt to these forthcoming changes. So when we talk about the strategy, as you can see in this basic chart, what we are doing is understanding exactly what are those environments, but at the same time, not only looking at the environment on this side, understanding our company. And when I say understanding our company, it means understanding what we are good at, what are our best resources or capabilities or strengths, what we do better than others, something that is distinctively better at my company. And what we have to do is leverage upon these strengths, trying to take and build upon our existing capabilities, what we do better than others, and this way try to adapt the company to the changing environment. We call this process a strategy, and you are going to understand not only the concept of a strategy. In this video, you are going to learn about understanding the strategic management process and understanding also what is the strategic plan. So basically what we can see in this chart is that the environment is changing and we need to really compare my company at the present time and how the new environmental changes can affect or influence my position in the market or my position in the industry. Once we have conducted one diagnosis, once we have understood exactly what's going on, what are the major changes happening, then we need to take action to really increase performance, okay? To improve performance and to be sure that we are still profitable in the market. And in addition, we have to take into account that when we are talking about the strategy, we are talking about how a company deals with all these environmental changes, how we develop specific action plans, how we conduct specific plans to really adapt to the changing environment. We need to understand the role of stakeholders. Stakeholders are those actors that have control and interest on our organization. In a very simple way, you can think that the most interested stakeholders and the actors that have a more prominent role on our company, or at least the power on our company, obviously are the shareholders, which basically means the owners of the company. But imagine that the company has different owners that can be really pervasively encountered when you analyze small companies, where different members of the same family are running the company, they own the shares of the company. And imagine that every different member of the family has a completely different perspective about what do we have to do in the future, what's going to be our best way, where do we have to respond using plan A and not using plan B. And other members of the family don't want to change, don't want to respond to this environmental change because they consider that this is not enough relevant or it's not a big issue that we need to react upon. So as you can see, stakeholders, their analysis is very, very important because it's about understanding that we have objectives in an organization, and the individuals, actors, and groups that are within this organization, maybe they have different perspectives. So imagine what are we going to do with, for instance, AI, artificial intelligence in company. I'm sure that all the owners and most of the shareholders in companies are really eager to apply AI in companies because they can develop better technologies, develop better products, and even employ less people to be more to get more cost reductions and get more profits. But think about, for instance, the unions. Unions, like the labor side, and not specifically the capital side that we have been talking right now. The labor side, the unions have a completely different perspective. Maybe they are not really interested in applying AI because they want to have more people working on the same tasks, and they do not understand that carrying on employees, carrying on cost reduction on this side, it's sound or it's really interesting for this company. But we also have the government. Governments really have a lot of interest on companies because companies create value and companies pay a lot of taxes. So as you can see, depending on the stakeholders, depending on whether we are from the shareholder perspective or from the unions, the labor perspective, or from the government perspective, or even we can add other different layers or perspectives that can be employees. Employees are big groups, even they are not organized by unions, that have a lot of interest in the company. Or the local community. Imagine that the company can pollute a lot, so the local community is very sensitive on that, and they are really, really interested on trying to enforce or impose standards for safety, standards for environmental regulations that can be much more interesting for the local community. And these measures are more aimed at trying to preserve the local natural resources rather than just maximize profits. So if we take all these things into account and we focus on these stakeholders side or perspective in this chart, we can imagine that each group in a given company has completely different perspectives and completely different visions. So maybe the labor is more interested on trying to preserve existing jobs or to increase, let's say, salaries. The local community is more interested on trying to avoid pollution in the local environment. And at the same time, the shareholders, the owners, are more interested just on growing and growing and growing and get profits. So all of them are going to put pressure and exert or trying to exert influence on which is the response that we give to this changing environment. So in a way, what I'm trying to tell you is that a strategy, it's a way to fit the company in the changing environment, but fitting the company in the changing environment means to have a response, and the response needs to have a direction. The response can be response A or B or C, depending on you are thinking of stakeholders A, B, or C. And you are going to have completely different paths, different plans, and of course, different outcomes. So as you can see, things are becoming a little bit more complex. So let's go to see all these things. You can see in the strategic drift, the line which is in red, which is about understanding how the company is or not aligned or fitted into the environment. And you can see that in blue, we have the environmental change. So up to more or less this point, you can see that the company is doing a lot of responses. The company is, for instance, launching new products. The company is adopting a lot of environmental standards for trying to be more clean, for trying to be cleaner, for trying to be less polluting. But upon a point, as you can see here in phase 2, you can see that we have a drift, you have a deviation, by which in blue the environment can be, for instance, the new competitor's product or the new environmental regulations or the new technological shifts that can affect my company or my industry are taking this direction, the one in blue, but the company has not changed. So as we can see, the company in red is deviated, it's far away from the best position that you have to be, which is a company that fits in the environment. We need to respond to environmental challenges, we need to adopt new technologies, we need to react in front of our competitors' new product launches, we need to really embrace AI, and we need to do all different things that seems to be the normal way to be productive, profitable, even when we have these changes and the way we respond to them. So later in phase 4, we have successfully changed, and we, starting from this point more or less, we are again in the right path to be really fitted in the environment. The problem that we can see in this chart is this area, phase 3, where the company has not successfully adapted to the environmental change. So that means that, for instance, all the companies in the industry are going to manufacture in China, or that means that all the companies in the industry are adopting environmental regulations, or that means that companies in the industry are getting rid of using plastics in packaging, or whatever, depending on the industry and the company. But our company has not yet responded, has not activated a plan to change and adapt to this environmental shift. So therefore, the company is not fitted into this changing environment. The reason why the company has not changed and embraced all these different environmental changes that you already know from the previous course, the reason why the company is not really responded can be because we didn't diagnose correctly the changes, or just because, as I told you, different stakeholders have different opinions and different perspectives in the way they have to adapt or propose a plan to change. Strategies about this, strategies finding a way and developing a plan from which we can adapt to this new situation. So again, let's have a look to this chart once you have a little bit more knowledge on it, and we can go a little bit further, more in depth to understand the things. Okay? So we assume that we have this interaction between the environment and the firm. Okay, the environment is changing, we need to adapt, all you know that. And therefore, if we are capable of aligning stakeholders, if we are capable of aligning stakeholders in one response, one single response, we can then develop the right strategy, which means develop an action plan that it's going to have decisions, actions, and as you can imagine, and we are going to look into that later, it has budget, responsible people in charge of doing the change, deadlines, investments, teams, and many more things that are going to be part of this plan. And once we have this stakeholders agreement, we are going to put a strategy to work. We are going to develop the plan and implement the plan, and we expect that we are going to have better firm performance, starting with the way that the company is going to keep adapted to the environment, the company is still profitable, and the company has not become obsolete because we didn't adapt to this new change. Now, when do we have a good strategy? First of all, understanding that the strategy is something that it's based on the long term, and it's like developing a new path, developing a new plan of action to try to really be, in the long term, profitable, to try to be and still to be an attractive company, and a company that has the capability to create value for many different actors, creating value for customers, creating value for our personnel, creating value for our owners, creating value for the local community, and many more ideas like that. So we have a good strategy if we are capable of fitting the company in a very consistent way to the environment, if we develop a strategy that is quite unique and different from our competitors, think about Tesla. Tesla has a unique value proposition that makes Tesla in a position that it's totally different from the rest of the industry. This uniqueness, this way to create genuine value, it's really part of what we call a strategy. The strategy is to be capable of position the company in the most interesting way in the environment, in a way that our product or our value proposition is different to the others and offer something unique. Think about the iPhone. I'm not talking about the fact that maybe the Samsung is technologically the same or at the same level of the iPhone. But the iPhone is in a position that gives something unique. The same way you may think of other different companies like Amazon. What Amazon does, it's a unique way of developing a marketplace. You have many different marketplaces, but not all of them are like Amazon. They are offering something unique, something original, something that really position the company in a competitive space that has as less competition as possible. Okay, we're gonna develop all these things all the time. Then what we have is that strategy means that we need to develop a plan to make the company not profitable or sustainable today, but in the long term. So when we talk about the strategy, it's very interesting that you understand that we are focused on the long term. It's very interesting that we are understanding that strategy means complexity. Complexity means that a strategy sometimes is going to turn around the company. It's going to change a lot of things. It's going to change departments, divisions, products. It's going to make a lot of things to try to react to this change. And when we talk about this complexity, we also need to understand that a strategy is something that it's always happening when the company wants to change the way it creates value. So think about, for instance, every time that Tesla is launching a new product at Ford or General Motors or other automotive companies, they have to respond to that. So the necessity by which all these combustion engine or traditional car companies are launching new EVs, new electric vehicles, is because they are developing strategic plans and they are responding to Tesla original positioning in the market space. They are responding to Tesla uniqueness of value proposition that they have, trying to develop something that is really, really original, different, new, and so on. So strategic decisions are those decisions that are really requiring huge investments, that really take a lot of complexity within the organization, as I told you. Decisions that are very focused on the long term, and at the same time decisions that imply and bring changes. Change is the really important thing when we talk about the strategy. For instance, we observe how Mercadona, which is a leading Spanish supermarket, has made and developed a strategy to respond to all this online e-commerce that they are going to suffer in the future in the grocery industry, from companies that are not or were not really important in the grocery industry before. Think about the companies that you know in the industry like Ocado or like even Amazon itself. So the response by Mercadona, the strategy, the way by which Mercadona is trying to get fit again to the changing environment is Mercadona Tech. Mercadona Tech is the kind of Amazon by Mercadona. It's just online e-commerce channel to trying to really adapt Mercadona to the changing environment. So this is an example of a strategy. So as you can see, it's very, very focused in the long term. It's not something that they are going to use for the next 6 months or for the next 2 years. It's something that they have developed because they know that the environment, the industry has changed, but it's going to continuously be changed. And all the existing supermarkets are trying to really get into that new business, which means e-commerce for groceries. So nowadays you can purchase online in many competitors, like other local supermarkets, including also the big ones like Carrefour and others. And Mercadona Tech, this new company that Mercadona has created, is the response, the strategic response to this environmental change. So as you can see, trying to understand the characteristics of the strategy, this is a very huge investment. It's a new company. It's a new company highly intensive in e-commerce, AI, internet, and things like that, which are not part of what we knew before from the grocery industry. It's very focused on the long term. It involves a lot of complexity. It's changing an entire organization. It's developing a new company. And of course, it means change. It means that in the future, stores at Mercadona would not be the most important place where they interact with customers. E-commerce, online channels are going to be the really important one, the fundamental channels of distribution by which Mercadona is going to have a relationship with customers. And Mercadona needs to create a new value proposition where the value of the product is not enough or the value of the stores are not enough. Now Mercadona has to really remove about developing practices to work on the store and adopt new techniques and practices which are more from e-commerce, data management, customer relationship management, trying to understand internet positions, and making a lot of things using social networks, using different ways of recommendation for customers, everything that is really the way that Amazon works, sending emails, all these things that are not happening right now in the grocery industry are going to be adopted and implemented in this industry. So as you can see, this is a very interesting way of understanding what is really a strategic change and what change means when we mean strategy. Really complex changes, long-term, huge investments, and completely changing the way that we do things. Now, why companies can be really poor when they are making these changes, or they have really strategic responses that are not really trying to maintain performance or increase performance. Sometimes the reason for this strategic failure, it's coming from a poor analysis or diagnosis of the problem. That means that, okay, we didn't understand exactly what this change meant. We didn't really understood how different environmental factors can really react. Maybe they developed the wrong strategy. Maybe they didn't have enough resources to change, or they were not capable to change. When I say in this particular box, organizational inertia, that means that the company is not capable of changing because the company is so locked in existing paradigm, so embedded to the usual way of doing things that change is impossible. All of you may think about why Nokia, that was the #1 cell phone company in Europe, lost this position, and now it's almost gone out of the smartphone industry. Nokia, despite having a lot of resources, capabilities, R&D management budget to make changes and so on, Nokia didn't respond with sufficient strength to the changes required and imposed by Apple with the iPhone. Nokia, or for instance, we can go to Toys R Us, or we can go to other companies as Kodak, are examples of this cognitive inertia where companies were not capable of changing. And as a result, no matter the strategy, they maybe had a very brilliant strategy, but they were not capable of implementing that strategy. So again, we need to understand that we have the company, strengths and weaknesses, what we are good at. Of course, when we are going to change, we need to really build upon these factors or assets that we have that really work. We need to really keep exploiting them and keep using them for the new value proposition or for being part of the change. The environment that you already know, okay, the strategy, the plan, and the shareholders. But we can put all together in this more interesting chart, where you see the process of strategic management. Strategic management is happening all the time. That means that all the time the company is getting indicators, KPIs, metrics, and trying to see whether we are or not adapted to the environment. Every time that Amazon is doing very good in one product, it's really, to some extent, it's really making a very, very important pressure, putting a lot of pressure on other companies that are competing against Amazon. So every time we are trying to understand whether this external environment, competition from Amazon or from others, it's really making our own product obsolete. So we are comparing what's happening and what can we do, what we are good at, if we have to change the product, or the product is okay, but we have to change just our marketing, or we have to invest in China to be more competitive, or we have to invest in a different country because we think that a new market, a new very interesting market it's going on there. So we are conducting all the time this diagnosis. In this diagnosis, we are going to understand the environment and understand what can be the best response. And then we are going to formulate a strategy. We are going to design all different strategic options. A company may have 2, 3, 4 ways of responding to these challenges. We call this strategic formulation. And in the strategic formulation, this is the stage where stakeholders have a lot to say. Stakeholders may say, for instance, labor, I don't like the plan B, I prefer plan A, but the owners may say, no, the best plan is the plan C. Or for instance, we have other different stakeholders like the local community that they would like plan D or plan F, albeit as you can imagine, the local community is interested but has no control or total influence on the decision-making process. But in any case, they are part of the stakeholder. And at the end of the day, our customers from the local community are the ones that are going to purchase our product. So we need to make them happy as well when we make the strategy, because we make a strategy, a plan that is not taking into account our customers. It's not going to be profitable. It's going to be a poor decision. So in this strategic formulation, for instance, imagine that we were discussing with the family, the owners. They have 3 members of the family. The 3 members of the family have the same power. They have the same voting rate, and they have to decide whether the plan B or the A or the C are the best. So we formulate the plan, and we are going to say, okay, in Mercadona, the best response, the best way to change for trying to embrace and adopt e-commerce and respond in the future to Amazon or to other different companies is launching a new company which is named Mercadona Tech. Let's say that this is plan A. But we may think that we also have plan B. The plan B says that no, we don't necessarily need a new company. We can develop, of course, the e-commerce marketplace, the site, the web page, but we do not need a new company because all the picking and delivery can be done from the stores, which was the old way of doing these things in Mercadona. Before they were launching Mercadona Tech, they had all the order fulfillment, picking, delivery, and so on, from the store, which was closest to the address of the new order. This is plan B. And we may have a plan C. We outsource e-commerce to a different company using our brand or using our products. I mean, as you can see, there are many multiple responses, many multiple options or plans that can be better or worse. But in any case, we present all different options in this strategic formulation where we design the plan. Sometimes owners are going to impose the plan and they are going to say it's A or B, or maybe owners are going to fight against each other and they need the support from the labor or the support from other groups, from the government, to impose plan C. And at the end of the day, we will have only one plan. In this strategic formulation, despite having many options, only one plan will be available. And this plan, of course, then needs to be implemented. This is a very important thing because sometimes the problem is not to develop a plan on the paper. You can develop great goals, great ways of responding to this challenge. But the problem is going to be, how are you going to put into practice this plan? How are you going to implement all the changes? How are you going to create a new company? How are you going to get the skills that you don't have about working with data systems that you were not used at? Or where are you going to find the people that knows how to work with algorithms, AI, and so on for developing the best optimized way of fulfilling orders? Many, many different problems. So implementation, it's really the most important thing. We need also to implement the plan with our people, with our organization. So when we implement the plan, we need to say to our employees, hey, we need to change, we need to do things differently, or we need to learn about how to do things in internet, or how to do things using AI, or how to do things with this new technology. And of course, change is very problematic. Not everyone is ready to change, and people don't like to change. So implementing can be the most important challenge. And at the end of this process, we have a way of controlling how the change is going on. Are we really successful? Are we achieving all the target returns that we expected? Are we having metrics that really are good enough to say that the change is going okay? For instance, in this particular case, is Mercadona Tech successful or not? Are they really fulfilling orders with high productivity? Are they profitable or not? Are they really penetrating new markets, or are they just taking the old customers from Mercadona? So all these things need to be asked. So at the end of the day, we have this strategic management process that starts with trying to make a strategic analysis, a diagnosis of the situation. We need to understand what's going on, comparing how we do things and how the market or the environment requires doing things differently. We need to be sure and test that we are not obsolete, and if we are becoming obsolete, Mercadona is not capable of selling things online, we need to change, we need to develop the plan, launch the Mercadona Tech. So we have the strategic analysis, which is a diagnosis, and I really give you in advance information about saying you that the diagnosis is made most of the times with SWOT analysis. As you can see, internal analysis, strengths and weaknesses, and the external one, the environment, opportunities and threats. So we know about that, and we will keep working on that. So we have this strategic analysis, strategic formulation, where we have all different options available. We have this stakeholders process, where they are going to find plan A or plan B or plan C. They are going to have voting rights. They are going to have really, really big fights at the board of directors and on the shareholder meeting. Let's see who has more capability to get imposed on the others. And finally, we're going to have the strategy implemented. We're going to have a plan going on, a plan that it's detailed about who is going to make the changes, how much money are we going to invest in those changes, what are the deadlines, what are the metrics for trying to track these changes and watch how these changes is being done. And finally, we have the capability to control the strategy. We have the strategic control. In this strategic control, we are going to really making a review about whether the strategy implementation goes well or not, and if we have to make an adjustment, a change, and give feedback to this strategic formulation to start again. So imagine that, I'll give you one brief example for you to understand this slide. Imagine that we are implementing a change, we are implementing Mercadona Tech, which is a way by which Mercadona responds to these environmental challenges from Amazon, internet, e-commerce, and so on. But we, in the strategic implementation, discovered that the way we are treating data, it's not really profitable. I mean, for instance, this is a real thing. We get a lot of data from order fulfillment. We need a lot of data from the orders from our customers, but we do nothing with this data, because working with this data, for instance, establishing recommendation system, like in Spotify or like in Netflix, or selling the data, I mean, not selling a personal profile, but selling the trends to the industry, can be a very profitable way to get more money in our company. And we are not doing that because this is not in the plan. Okay. So in the strategic control, we identify that we are missing a lot of an important way to create new value. So we can change a little bit the plan, modify in a flexible way to include a new activity which is about data management to be more profitable. So this is a way that telling you that the strategic plan has to be flexible and ready for some amendments or some small changes or big changes. In addition, because when we are making the diagnosis and we are understanding or diagnosing the environment, we have limited information. But once we are implementing the change from the established plan, we have new information. And maybe some of the competitors that we identify as being very important ones are underperforming, they are not really a challenge. So we do not need to really put too much effort on this particular activity or task that we design, thinking of and believing that they were really aggressive. So we can modify the plan and say, okay, this activity is not anymore important, let's focus more on the others. So let's change investments, personnel, and effort on the other different activities. So as you can see, the strategic plan needs to be flexible because every time that we control for it, we need to give feedback, we need to change, it has to be flexible. And a strategic plan usually takes 3 years, 2-3 years more or less. And it has to be flexible because depending on the implementation and also because depending on how the information is being modified. For instance, we thought that the COVID was lasting very few short period of time, but the COVID really took longer, so we need to modify our strategic plans, all the ways that we were reacting to this new change. Or the crisis of semiconductors that lasted almost 2 years before we recovered again the semiconductor activity, which was critical and necessary for manufacturing cars or manufacturing different levels of equipment. So this is the strategic management process, which is very, very important because it summarizes all different stages: diagnosis, formulation, implementation, and control. Very interestingly, what I have talked to you about strategic decisions, because we need to take into account that at the end of the day, even though we say that we have a strategy, and this strategy is materialized, tangible in a strategic plan, a document that says what we have to do, that says our direction, says our efforts have to be materialized buying these machines or developing these skills or hiring new personnel from this place or from the other. We have people there. So at the end of the day, having people means that more than just a strategy or a plan, we have people that is responsible for developing the plan, people that is responsible for designing the plan. So as you can see, we have a lot of stakeholders in the organization. It's not only about understanding the owners, it's about the board of directors, okay? The board of directors, which is a group of people that really influences the decision-making process, okay? They have developed ideas, they are evaluating and controlling the implementation of the plan. They are also trying to impose conditions, and they, of course, defend the shareholders' interest. So the board of directors is the critical group that it's really establishing how the change has to be, which is going to be the strategic plan that we need to implement, and so on. The board of directors has all the top management members in, especially some of them represented by the CEO. So as you can imagine, we need to talk about people. We need to talk about what members are in the board of directors, what are their interests, what are their visions for the future that can differ from other different members of the organization. So we need to go also to understand all these things. I put you a real example in this particular case. I mean, you can see the board of directors at Mercadona, where you can see the president and CEO, which is the owner at the same time. Not every time everything is going to be overlapped. We can have companies that have one president, one owner, one CEO, one member of the family is doing this thing or the other thing. This is a more complex matter. But what I told you about who is going to decide the plan is going to be plan A or B or C, or who are the most important stakeholders in the process, we need to take into account that the organization is very, very important. What is the organization? So the organization, it's about the people that has the power and control in the company, the board of directors. It's about also the organization. It's about the employees, the different layers, the different departments, the different organizational charts, the different ways that we say, okay, we want an organization that has a really high hierarchy, or an organization that is more flat. We want an organization that has a lot of departments, or an organization that has autonomous small teams that work in functional areas. We have the team for sales, we have the team for marketing, we have the team for manufacturing, we have the team for product A, the team from product B, that includes members from different departments. I mean, we will discuss about this, but it's how we organize people. So when we talk about organization, it's about the people, the structure, and especially the culture. We're going to talk about the culture. What I'm telling you guys is that we have this strategic management process by which we make a diagnosis of the situation. We try to compare external and internal, and therefore we decide what's going to be the best. We develop some objectives. We get a strategy, a plan to try to make the company again fit into the environment, try not to make the company obsolete, try to renew the products, to make the company attractive, to make the company surviving in the long term, profitable, this or that. But in addition, on the top of that, we need to be sure that the strategy fits in our organization. That means that the right people that we need for developing the strategy is in the organization, and that the people knows the change, the people understands the change, because the people in our organization has to implement the change. So I want to tell you that the strategy has to fit not only with the environment, the strategy has to fit to the organization. And when we talk about organization, we are talking about people, basically people, departments, executives, top, middle executives, blue collar, white collar. Talking about people is talking about personal ambitions, personal goals. Talking about people is talking about power. And this, it's talking about control. It's talking about many, many different things. Some of them are in what we call the organizational culture. So we need to understand people, and we need to understand the culture in one organization, because at the end of the day, in yellow, the organization, it's, let's say, the cornerstone for the successful diagnosis, formulation, implementation, and control of the strategy. Even though the board of directors and the CEO are going to be supervising and controlling the strategy, at the end of the day, our people has to implement the changes. So we need to count on them. This is also a way for you to understand that the strategy is not an empty blank plan, that it's not considering people. People is involved in the change. People is going to be more ready to change or not. So we need to understand the people in our organization. That means for the new strategy, strategy A or plan A, we need to change the structure of our organization. We need to go from departments to autonomous groups. We need to make our structure from more to less hierarchical, a flatter structure. Or we need to change the divisions and not anymore having division for product A or product B. We need to change in a different way. So it's very important that we understand and identify the way that people works and behaves in a company, and especially understanding culture. When we talk about culture, this is a very interesting topic that we are going to cover in this course. We are talking about all these different values, beliefs, taking for granted paradigms. A paradigm is the way you understand things. So taking for granted assumptions means that people knows about what is wrong and what is right, what has to be done and what cannot be done in this company, what is supposed to be a company's response from what is to be something that is not in us, okay? So talking about culture means that we need to know the right way of doing things. So for instance, in Google, it's very normal, it's part of the culture that employees have 20% free time to think about new ideas, to try to think about how new innovations can really bring value to the company, create value to the consumers, and this and that. This is a cultural factor at Google. So every time that you plan for a change, this 20% thinking, this 20% time of people for thinking, it's part of the game. It's assumed as the right way to do things. It's part of what we are, okay? And therefore in Google it's normal that all employees contribute with new ideas. All employees are critical about changes, but critical in a constructive way, bringing new ideas, new perspectives. All employees propose new ways of doing things. Now, the same cultural factor described in Google can be the wrong way of doing things in a different company. There are companies where employees' ideas or employees' critiques or employees' disagreements or employees' different perspectives are considered to be wrong because they are confronting with the managers, they are confronting with the shareholders, they are not really following orders. Imagine what I'm talking right now, it's a more hierarchical structure where the top down it's deciding what to do and what not to do. So as you can see, if we have in this particular example Google on one side and a different company on the other side, these two companies have different ways of doing things, taking for granted assumptions. We are talking about the way people respond to change in an expected way, okay? We will keep working on this idea of culture. So at the end of the day, it's very important that we understand organization, which is the way that people works with others, departments, the structure, okay? The way we organize people, and at the same time, the way we present the culture in a company. Without understanding people and understanding the culture, it's very difficult to formulate a new strategy. So as you can see, everything has to be coherently integrated, not only the process of a strategic analysis, formulation and implementation, but also a deep diagnosis of our culture, understanding who we are, understanding how we do things, and understanding that sometimes a big change in the strategic plan, taking a strategy B or C that requires a big turnaround, a very important shift, can be counterproductive if our culture is not ready to change. Imagine there are companies where changing, responding to environmental changes, doing things differently, it's the normal way of doing things. It's culture. It's cultural there. It's a cultural factor they have. In these organizations that we call them organic versus mechanistic, which are more rigid, in these organizations, any strategic plan works because you don't have to convince people to change. They know that they have to change. The only thing they have to communicate to them is what to do and what changes are coming. There are other companies, think about more bureaucratic public organizations, city councils, governors' offices, or even the federal government, where more bureaucracy is expected, a more rigid or mechanistic organization is expected there. So people don't like to change, people want to keep doing the same, they don't want to do new things. So in this particular case, a very challenging strategy can be very detrimental and can be unsuccessfully implemented because people don't want to change. So in these organizations, big changes don't work, because the first thing you have to do is changing how we understand change, changing the culture. And sometimes changing the strategy can be okay, but changing the culture is going to be more complex. The best companies, as you can imagine, are those that have really flexible strategic systems and flexible organizations, the culture, which is ready to change, so they can better be aligned and integrated for any change. Okay, guys, so this is a little bit a brief description of all different concepts in a strategy, and we are going to keep working on all these things in the next videos. Thank you so much.